Louisiana town where the air was always heavy with the scent of jasmine and the occasional whiff of salty bayou. My family, though close-knit, had its share of secrets and burdens. We lived on inherited land, and while it carried generations of pride, it also bore unspoken expectations. My father and grandfather worked tirelessly in construction, crafting homes that felt as sturdy as their values. I, however, chose a different path, one they respected but didn't quite understand: nursing. In my late teens, I met Bonnie at a local festival. She was magnetic, with laughter that could cut through the humid Louisiana air like a cool breeze. We married young, against whispers that we were rushing. Her father, a well-off plastic surgeon, made it clear he doubted I was worthy of her. I was determined to prove him wrong. Our first years together were a blend of hard work and tender moments. While I toiled in the ICU, Bonnie's career blossomed in finance. We bought our first house, a modest but charming fixer-upper that I rebuilt with my father and grandfather. Life seemed as steady as the oak trees that shaded our front yard. Then, after years of saving and building, my father gifted us the sprawling home where this story begins, a gesture of trust that rooted us deeper into the land I once dreamed of escaping. But cracks began to form in the seemingly perfect picture. Bonnie started spending late nights at work, and I chalked it up to her ambition. Then came the girls' nights that stretched into early mornings. My instincts, honed by years in critical care, whispered that something was wrong, but I silenced them. I wanted to believe in her and in us, until the day everything unraveled. When chaos strikes, knowing what matters most is crucial. If someone collapses from cardiac arrest, you initiate chest compressions immediately, keeping oxygen flowing to the brain until a defibrillator can restart the heart. If there's bleeding, you stop it first. Worrying about a broken bone comes later. Prioritization saves lives. Yet as I sat on the patio, staring into the humid Louisiana evening, I felt utterly lost. For the first time, I had no idea what to tackle first. As a critical care nurse, my instincts had always been sharp. I could anticipate danger before it fully surfaced. That ability had saved countless lives. But somehow I had completely missed the slow disintegration of my own marriage, an 18-year commitment crumbling right under my nose. And at that moment, I didn't want to save it. I wanted to burn it to the ground. But clarity hit me like a cold slap. Revenge would only create collateral damage. I took another sip of beer, my gaze fixed on the backyard. The lawn stretched toward the bayou, framed by towering oaks and pecan trees. Landscaping was minimal. Louisiana had enough snakes without inviting more. The house, a sprawling 4-bedroom with a deep shaded porch, had been a wedding gift from my father and grandfather. Built by our family business, Fontenot and Sons, it sat on 8 acres of inherited land. Though I'd chosen nursing over construction, a decision that had disappointed my grandfather, he had still respected my path. Family had always been my anchor. Now, that foundation was cracked beyond repair. I spotted my sister Susan making her way across the yard from her nearly identical home next door. Lifting a hand to catch her attention, I braced myself. We needed to talk. She eyed my beer as she reached the porch. Starting early, huh? Then her gaze drifted to the cooler beside me. Stockpiling, I see. I'm off the rest of the week, I muttered. She knew how my schedule worked. Long shifts, then consecutive days off. Overtime had funded my boat, my truck, and all the little extras. She grabbed a beer and settled into the chair beside me. All right, what's going on? You told me to take the day off, so I assume it's serious. It is, I said. Bonnie's been cheating. Her expression shifted from skepticism to shock. Are you sure? Maybe it's a mistake? I exhaled. There's a video, no doubt about it. Her face darkened. Who sent it? Anonymous account. Pissed off 999. She clenched her jaw, fury rising. That cheating witch, who's the guy? I hesitated. If Rich ever did that to me, I'd ruin him. She growled. Then something clicked. Wait a second. When would Bonnie even have time? She's home almost every night, except for those rare girls' nights, and she carpools with Rich. She froze. Her face paled. Then it flushed deep red. They're screwing each other. I watched as she processed it. The fury in her eyes burned hot, but she swallowed back her emotions. I pulled her into a hug. I wanted to break it to you gently, I murmured. She stiffened at first, but after a deep breath, she exhaled and slumped against me. I had a couple of hours to absorb the shock before calling her. That buffer had kept me from grabbing a tool and making the situation worse. She pulled away, rubbing her face, then her usual fire returned. What's the plan? Confront them? I shook my head. We keep our heads, act normal. Kiss our spouses goodnight like nothing's changed. She frowned. I'm serious, I said. We don't let them know we know. We talk to a lawyer first. She inhaled sharply, still trying to process it. I smirked, aiming for levity. At least we know we haven't caught anything. Unless you have secrets, too. She shot me a glare. Hell no. But damn, now I have to think about that, she shuddered. You know me, I joke about being famous, but not in that kind of movie. She cracked open another beer. For the record, she muttered, Rich is getting nothing from me. I just started my period, and it's staying that way until we drop the hammer. Bonnie can deal with his sorry A. We also can't tell the kids. Not yet, I cautioned. She nodded. Where are they now? With Mom and Dad. I sent them over this morning. Dad's keeping the boys busy, and the girls are free to do whatever. No questions asked. By kids, I meant my 2 and her 3. Our children had practically grown up as siblings, their bond unshakable. Jason, my oldest, was 17. Susan's son Rob was just a few months younger. Her twins, Dave and Cindy, along with my daughter Deirdre, were all 16. 5 teenagers within 2 years had been chaotic, but we'd made it work. Rich had always been the hands-on dad and uncle. I was the one who took them out into the wild, fishing, hunting, camping. In the early years, we camped in the backyard. As they got older, we ventured deeper into the bayou. Eventually, our trips required 2 boats, so either Susan or Rich would come along. Rich had always called it getting into the wild, but over the past year, he started backing out, letting the boys take his boat while he stayed home. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. 3 weeks ago, I took a 6-day trip with the kids. 1 boat for me and the girls, another for the boys. We camped, fished, crabbed at night. It felt like a perfect family escape. Turns out Bonnie and Rich didn't care about family. Telling the kids would be the hardest part. We can't keep this from them forever, Susan admitted. But we have time, she exhaled. So what's next? I don't forgive cheating. Neither do I. Bonnie's done. But I need to make sure she doesn't take everything. As much as I'd love to feed her to the gators, I'm not going to jail, and she's not taking my kids. Susan leaned forward. We hit them where it counts. Money. Rich is about to learn what financial ruin feels like. I nodded. She had a strong case. But Bonnie? That could get messy. Courts favored mothers. Susan smirked. Our houses? They're in our names. Dad made sure of that before marriage. They can't touch them. I frowned. She might convince a judge to let her stay. Maybe, but she doesn't own it. She studied me. Didn't you 2 sign a prenup? Dad had insisted. At the time, I thought it was excessive. Now it was a lifeline. Bonnie's father, a wealthy plastic surgeon, had demanded one too. If either of us cheated, the guilty party walked away with just 20% of shared assets. No alimony, no spousal support. Louisiana law honored prenups. Her father thought I'd be the one to betray Bonnie. Ironically, it was his daughter who wrecked everything. Susan's expression hardened. I'm worried about that video. That stopped me cold. Who filmed it? And why? I muttered. 3 angles, no edits, and they never noticed. Susan's eyes darkened. Show me. I pulled up the file. She clenched her fists. Those sick fools. Hearing them laugh at us made her blood boil. Rich is done, she whispered. But we need to find out who sent this. I nodded. We wait. She sat in silence, then suddenly her shoulders trembled. The anger cracked, giving way to quiet sobs. I reached over, pulling her close, and for the first time all day I couldn't hold back my own tears. That night I wasn't drunk, but I'd had too much. A half-finished beer rested in my hand when Bonnie walked in. I greeted her with a hug, my mask firmly in place. I expected her to pull away, to rush for the shower. Instead, she kissed me. Hard. I inhaled, searching for cologne. Nothing, just her usual perfume. I took a slow sip of beer, my rage hidden beneath the surface. Dinner's ready, I said evenly. Bonnie hesitated, then sighed. Damn, I was hoping you'd eat something, and it wasn't food. Susan and I had already decided on takeout. Neither of us had the energy to cook, not without joking about poisoning our spouses. Dark humor kept us from losing control. The next morning I stood by the window, watching as Bonnie slid into Rich's car for their usual carpool to work. My stomach clenched, but I kept my expression neutral. The game wasn't over yet. I picked up my phone and called Susan. How'd it go? I asked. Surprisingly smooth, she admitted. Almost lost my temper a couple of times, but sticking to the plan helped. Bet he's meeting up with Bonnie tonight. Any clue where? Susan was raw, Angry, hurt, venting. Normally, she was a wild card, but right now, brutal honesty was all that mattered. By 10 a.m., we were sitting across from Jake, one of her firm's senior partners. Divorce was his expertise. "You're positive this video captures both of them?" he asked. We nodded, but kept the footage to ourselves for now. "As long as your evidence is solid, that's all you need," he said, a smirk creeping onto his face. "By the way, I reviewed your prenups. Damn, those things are ironclad. Can't believe you both signed without independent counsel." "My father made sure I did," I said. "Same with Susan and Rich." Jake let out a low whistle. "If either of you had been the ones cheating, you'd be in serious trouble. But since they were the ones who strayed, they're looking at a 20% cut of the shared assets. No alimony, no claim on your income." "Any loopholes?" Susan pressed. "Not many," Jake said. "If Bonnie had personal accounts before marriage, like any leftover wedding money, she keeps that. But any money earned during the marriage and not disclosed to you, that's fair game." I leaned forward. "What about home improvements?" He hesitated. "That's a gray area. Since the properties were gifted to you before marriage, they're protected. But major renovations, like your solar panels, could be considered joint expenses. A judge might rule that she's entitled to a portion of their value." I crossed my arms. "She can take her 20% and whatever furniture she wants. Hell, she can carry it out herself." Jake chuckled. "That kind of hassle might make her walk away with even less." "Exactly," Susan said. "But listen, do not leak that video," Jake warned. "If it can be traced back to you, they could sue for invasion of privacy." I frowned. "What if they recorded it themselves and it just ended up out there?" Jake shrugged. "Then that's their problem. But until you figure out how to use it strategically, keep it under wraps." Susan and I exchanged a look. We had considered exposing them to friends and family. The only thing stopping us was the kids. Now, though, we needed to figure out who had recorded it in the first place. We debated when to serve the divorce papers, Thursday or Friday. We settled on Friday. Let them sweat all weekend. Jake disagreed. "Dragging it out just racks up legal fees. Plus, the sooner they get served, the sooner they're forced to submit financial records. And if their attorney even picks up the phone, that's billable." We considered having them served in person. Maybe at lunch. A divorce decree with dessert. Jake smirked. "Tempting, but bad optics. Don't escalate." Instead, we arranged for the papers to be delivered at work, right in front of their coworkers. After leaving Jake's office, we hit the bank. Within hours, we drained 80% of our joint accounts into new ones, paid off credit cards, and closed them. Their cars were already paid off, so there was no risk of repossession. Jake had emphasized the importance of keeping everything above board. No sneaky tactics. We followed his advice. At the bank, I checked my email. 3 new video clips of Bonnie and Rich. Same hotel room, same angles. I replied to the anonymous sender. "Appreciate the info. How did you get these?" Also, concerned about them ending up online. That last part was a lie. A twisted part of me wanted them to go viral, but I had to play it safe. An hour later, a response arrived. 9203 Victoria Street, apartment 201. I drove there immediately. It was an unassuming apartment complex. Nothing fancy, just functional. The receptionist at the front desk was no help. "I think my brother-in-law is renting an apartment here for an affair," I said, leaning in. Blank stare. "I just need to know if he's a tenant." Nothing. I sighed. "I get it, you can't confirm anything. But here's the thing, he's got a record. Possible pill connections. Maybe human trafficking. Courtesans." Her expression changed. "What exactly are you asking?" she said warily. I smiled. "I just need to know who's leasing apartment 201. 5 minutes later, I walked out with a printout in my pocket. For 2 years, the apartment had been leased by Bonnie and Rich's company, with Rich listed as the primary tenant. Someone had uncovered their little hideaway and blown the whistle. I wondered how their employer would feel about footing the bill for their affair. But that was a problem for later. At exactly 12:30 p.m., Bonnie called. It had been 30 minutes since she'd been served. I could only imagine the chaos. "What the hell do you mean you're divorcing me?" she demanded. I almost laughed at her nerve. Keeping my tone calm, I replied, "You found someone else. I'm letting you go." I didn't mention the videos. The plan was simple. Keep them off balance. Don't reveal our full hand. "Infidelity?" Bonnie scoffed. "Oh, come on. People gossip, sure, but Rich is my brother-in-law. Who told you this? Some jealous coworker?" "Yeah," I said coolly. "Something like that." She exhaled sharply. "If you follow through with this, you're the one moving out. I'll get custody, and you'll be paying child support. I'll take half of everything. Your boat, your truck. You'll probably have to sell them just to settle." I let her ramble. Mistaking my silence for hesitation, she continued, "I'm keeping the house, and you'll keep paying the bills. And since Susan served Rich, guess what? He'll move in with me. You can sit over there with your sister and wonder what we're doing in your bed." I took a steady breath. "Go ahead," I said evenly. "Call your lawyer." She had no idea what was coming. "Oh, and by the way," I added, voice calm as ever, "the kids are packing your things as we speak. Susan's handling Rich's. Everything will be on the front lawn this afternoon. Locks were changed this morning. We've already filed restraining orders, so you'll need to find somewhere else to stay." Bonnie started screaming. I hung up. 10 minutes later, Susan texted, "Backyard, bring beer, make sure it's full." I grabbed the cooler and stepped outside. Susan was already halfway through hers when I sat down. "That fool," she muttered, "tried to convince me it was just rumors. Told me, 'Baby, don't believe some secretary over me. Bonnie and I are just close.'" I smirked. Bonnie said the exact same thing. Susan shook her head. "If Rich were here, I'd hit him so hard, he'd be picking his teeth out of the grass." I took a sip of beer. I told Bonnie to pack her things and to call first, because I'll be answering the door with a loaded tool. Susan grinned. "Jake's sending 2 deputies over, just in case." "I don't need babysitters," I grumbled. "No, but Jake knows you, and he knows how close you are to snapping." She wasn't wrong. The deputies weren't for Bonnie and Rich. They were there to keep me from doing something I couldn't take back. My phone dinged. A new email. "Think it's from our mystery informant?" Susan asked. I opened it. An audio file. Bonnie's voice came through, irritated. "Can you believe Robert and Susan served us? They must have found out somehow. Just last night, Robert was all over me. If he hadn't been so drunk, I think we would have done it right there in the living room. And now this." "Relax," Rich replied. "They don't know anything. Not really. Someone probably saw us at lunch or carpooling. People gossip. No one has proof. We never touch in public, never act suspicious. Just deny, deny, deny." Bonnie sighed. "I'd love to leave town like we planned, but this is too soon. The kids are still in school, and we haven't secured the money yet." Rich sounded smug. "If they go through with the divorce, we'll make them pay. I have a frat brother who's a lawyer. He'll take our case. Just don't admit to anything. Assume everything is being recorded." The audio ended. Susan and I sat in silence. "So we don't know anything?" I said slowly. "Just rumors." Susan clenched her jaw. "They've been planning this for a while. He's had that apartment for years." I exhaled. "I'm more worried about the money. Rich made it clear they need to lock down their finances. We have to get ahead of them before they try something shady." Susan nodded, her eyes glistening. "We have to stay strong." "I know." "Jake said your situation is worse than mine," I admitted. "Courts favor women. If Bonnie fights for custody and stays in the house until Deirdre turns 18, I'm screwed. The prenup helps, but if I have to pay child support while she lives there for free, that's brutal." Susan hugged me as silent tears slipped down her face. There were no winners here. Divorce wasn't about winning. It was about surviving with as little damage as possible. Inside, the kids were quiet when they heard us enter. Deirdre and Cindy were shoving Bonnie's things into suitcases. When they ran out, they switched to trash bags. "Take pictures before sealing them," I instructed. I didn't explain that I planned to deduct the cost of every suitcase and garbage bag from Bonnie's share of the assets. Every little bit counted. Next door, the boys were almost done. Rich had fewer clothes, and they weren't bothering to fold anything. They stuffed his things into whatever containers they could find. I smirked as Rob, Rich's own son, shoved a $2,000 suit into a trash bag like it was an old t-shirt. They had my back. For a second, I wondered if they'd cover for me if I pissed in that bag. I decided not to put them in that position. Just as we finished, my phone buzzed. A text from Bonnie. On our way home now. I called Jake immediately. 15 minutes later, he pulled up with 2 sheriff's deputies. Jake smirked. "Relax and enjoy," he said when I asked if he was covering the cost. Bonnie and Rich arrived in his car. Another vehicle followed. Boudreaux, Landry, of course. Boudreaux had been a schoolyard bully since childhood, dumb as a rock, but somehow he scraped through law school. Now here he was. "Hey, Robert," he called, stretching my name in his thick Cajun accent. I clenched my jaw. When my father said it, it was affectionate. From him, it made my skin crawl. "I hear you got some trouble with your wife and brother-in-law," he said. "Ain't no big deal." If I'd had a tool, I might have put a bullet between his eyes without blinking. but I knew better than to fight him. He was 6'3", 300 pounds. The best I could do was run until he collapsed from a heart attack and then kick him while he was down. "Hey, Boudreaux," I said evenly. "How's your mom and them?" "Good, good," he replied, then flipped the switch. The fake charm vanished. "So you really think my boy Rich is screwing your wife?" His grin told me everything. Rich had trusted him. Boudreaux had known all along, and he was here to gaslight me. "Well," I said coolly, "that's the story." Jake stepped in closer, sensing the tension. I exhaled. I'm not putting up with it. I dropped the Cajun act as fast as Boudreaux had. I wasn't playing that game. Bonnie stepped forward, arms crossed. "You emptied our bank account." "Yes," I said flatly. "And I have the statements to prove how much was there. When we divide assets, you'll get exactly what you're owed." Bonnie glared. I didn't mention her credit cards were useless. She'd find out soon enough. Neither Susan nor I followed them inside. Instead, Deirdre and Cindy shadowed Bonnie, a deputy close behind. Jason and Rob did the same for Rich. "Where's my jewelry?" Bonnie demanded. I had expected that fight. I had bought her expensive pieces over the years. Tanzanite, emeralds, rubies, diamonds. I had them appraised a few years ago, worth at least $25,000. Now, most of it was locked away in my safe. Boudreaux opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when I snapped a photo of Bonnie's ring and necklace. "Insurance records," I said, "just making sure nothing mysteriously disappears." Bonnie hesitated, then handed them over after whispering with Boudreaux. "So where the hell am I supposed to go?" she snapped. I almost said, "Try your Victoria Street love nest," but shrugged instead. Just days ago, I had loved this woman. Now I felt nothing. Not even anger, just nothing. Bonnie and Rich finally left. Boudreaux followed. I turned to Jake. "Think they're heading to the apartment?" Jake grinned. "I hope so. I have someone tailing them." But they weren't that dumb. Instead of going to their hideaway, they checked into a Holiday Inn. I made a mental note to follow up later. That evening, Susan and the girls were making dinner when my phone beeped. Another email. She followed me to my room as I pulled up the file on my computer. The recording started playing. Boudreaux's voice came through first. "You're probably being followed. That's why I told you to stay at a motel. Get a room with 2 beds. Make both look slept in. Investigators can bribe housekeeping to check. Tell them you're just sharing to save money." Rich scoffed. "Yeah, well, my credit card got declined at check-in. That was fun." "Good thing I pulled out extra cash," Bonnie muttered. Boudreaux continued. "Start listing your assets. Robert's got the jewelry documented, so you won't get away with that. But if you have money or valuables he doesn't know about, hide them. Legally, it's community property, but what they don't know, they can't claim." "Should we ask for a full list of the jewelry?" Bonnie asked. "No point," Boudreaux said. "Robert's right. You'd just sell them off cheap and claim they never existed. If you've got gold or cash stashed, bury it. If you have a secret bank account, keep it small. Anything under your social security number is easy to track. Offshore accounts are safer. Just don't get caught hiding assets. If this goes to court, you'll have to swear you disclosed everything. If they catch you lying, that's perjury." A pause. Bonnie broke the silence. "So what now?" "They can find our Baton Rouge accounts," Rich muttered. "I thought we were safe using the office address." "Screw that," Rich snapped. "I'll be damned if Susan gets another dime." "We need to call the airline," Bonnie said. "See if we can get to the Cayman Islands tonight. We'll open an account first thing in the morning and transfer the money electronically." "Too late to get cashier's checks now," Rich grumbled. "I'll check flights. You handle the motel. Mess up the beds, wet the tissues, ruffle the towels, run the shower for a few minutes. Open the soap, pour out some shampoo, make it look real before we check out." The audio ended. Susan rubbed her temples. "Do they really have secret accounts? Where's the money coming from? I see our bank statements. I know what we make. He couldn't stash enough offshore without me noticing." I felt the same frustration. Bonnie and I rarely used cash, and I reviewed every credit card statement. "I told the woman at the apartment complex that Rich might be into pills and trafficking," I admitted. "I was bluffing, but you don't think—" Susan snorted. "Rich? Mr. Straight-Laced? He wouldn't even know where to start. Then again, I never thought he'd cheat either." We couldn't do anything about potential hidden accounts yet, so we let it go for the night and joined the kids for dinner. The next morning, I stopped by a jeweler to get appraisals, then a tool dealer to document my firearms. I wasn't selling anything, just making sure everything was officially valued. The process cost me a new Glock, something I wanted anyway. Now Bonnie couldn't claim I was making unauthorized purchases. Susan finished work and met me at Jake's office. I played him the latest recordings. Jake shook his head. I'd love to know who's sending you these. How the hell did they bug a hotel room? A PI couldn't have moved this fast. Susan crossed her arms. Can we access their bank accounts? Not without a judge's order, Jake said. Even then, we have to find them first. Might take a PI. I'll have my guy dig around. No big withdrawals? Susan and I shook our heads. Then it's not worth chasing right now, Jake said. If they were stashing money, they've been doing it for years. Let's stay focused and get this divorce done quickly. Susan and I agreed. We wanted it over as soon as possible. In this state, divorce takes 6 months, Jake continued. But we can push for an early court date. Next week, we'll meet with Bonnie, Rich, and their lawyer to go over assets. Then we'll see a judge. Good news? This state runs on Napoleonic law. Probate's a mess, but divorce is fast, especially with proof of infidelity. I'll try to skip counseling, but some judges still require it. After the ruling, it's just waiting out the 6 months. Jake smirked. Oh, and Boudreaux called, wants you to release 30% more of the money you pulled from joint accounts. I rolled my eyes. Of course he did. I told him no, Jake said. Reminded him the prenup states the cheating spouse gets only 20%. Then I sent him a copy of the agreement. Susan laughed. Let me guess. He demanded proof of infidelity. Yep. Told him he'd get it in court. He wasn't happy, but he's out of moves. Jake leaned back, grinning. It's fun watching Boudreaux scramble. He's a stain on the legal profession. If I can slip an audio recording of him advising clients to hide assets into the courtroom, he won't get disbarred, but he'll sure as hell be humiliated. I hated being away from home, but I had to work that weekend. Sharon, the head nurse, had called earlier, saying she couldn't cover my shifts. What if I suddenly start coughing and need a COVID test? I asked. Would you find someone then? A-hole, Sharon laughed. Yeah, I could, but only for the weekend. We need senior staff, and I've got family stuff in Lafayette. My husband's already pissed I missed the last one. I get it, she added. If I found out my husband was cheating, I'd lose it too. You've got plenty of vacation and sick days. This qualifies as an emergency. Mental health counts as a sick day, right? How about this? I work the weekend and you start my vacation Monday? She exhaled. Really? You'd do that? You're saving me here. Yeah, well, you owe me. I do, she admitted. I'll start you on sick leave, then roll it into vacation. Take what you need. Just keep me posted. Honestly, work was a relief. Weekends in the ICU were unpredictable. Fewer scheduled procedures, but constant vigilance. The doctors only did rounds. We were their eyes and ears. Still, I wasn't expecting to see my father-in-law waiting at the nurse's station when I returned from rounds. I stopped. Dr. Prejean, what brings a plastic surgeon to the ICU? My voice was casual, loud enough for the nurses to hear. Most knew he was my father-in-law. The rest would soon find out. His expression was cold. Cut the crap, he hissed. We need to talk. Inside the head nurse's office, he didn't waste time. What the hell is this about you kicking Bonnie out? He demanded. She called her mother last night, sobbing. I met his stare. John, Bonnie is having an affair. I wasn't sugarcoating anything. It had taken years for this man to respect me, and he knew I didn't lie. The worst part? I continued. She's cheating with my sister's husband. I'm dealing with a full-blown family crisis. John exhaled, shaking his head. That's just office gossip. People talk because they commute together, have lunch together. You know how rumors spread. She told us before that people speculated she was sleeping with her boss, and that was nonsense too. I wasn't about to dump everything I had on him, but I knew being direct was best. I haven't told anyone except my lawyer and Susan, I said. Not even Bonnie and Rich know how much I know. I swallowed, keeping my emotions in check. But I have proof, John. Video and audio, the kind that makes it undeniable. His face changed. His eyes widened. Real shock. What are you going to do? He asked. What can I do? I replied. I'm trying to protect the kids. They don't deserve this. But I can't just let it slide. I leaned in. John, what would you do if Bonnie walked in here with proof that I'd been cheating? John didn't hesitate. I'd want your head on a platter, he admitted. His face fell, his shoulders slumping. I'm sorry, Robert, I had no idea. His voice was almost apologetic. He sighed. I'll help Bonnie. I won't let her be homeless. But don't mistake that for excusing her. If you say you have proof, I believe you. I nodded. I'd expect nothing less. With that, he walked out. I felt worse for him than I did for Bonnie. That night, Susan shook her head when I told her. So he finally realized his little girl isn't perfect. That had to sting. She took a sip of beer. You know we have to tell Mom and Dad soon, right? I nodded. Tomorrow night, after my shift. We can't keep them in the dark. We both knew it wouldn't be easy. When we finally told them, my father asked one question. Do you have proof? I met his gaze. Undeniable proof. Like John, he was more focused on the kids than on us. I respected that. In our family, children came first. Adults dealt with their mess, but kids were never lied to. I hadn't received any new messages from my mystery source, but I already had enough. 4 videos, audio recordings, and proof this wasn't a fling. It was long-term planned and calculated. Bonnie hadn't just cheated, she had stolen from us. The Cayman Islands account still didn't add up, but just knowing it existed made my blood boil. Jake had started digging, running their social security numbers through financial databases. Even if the money was gone, we could subpoena the bank records. By Wednesday morning, we had answers. At Jake's office, we went over assets with a court-appointed financial auditor. I provided salary records and a pay stub I'd found for Bonnie. She makes about $5,000 a month, I said, sliding the papers across Jake's desk. With my overtime, we usually earn about the same by year-end. Jake nodded. That's good for you. Even without the prenup, she can't claim alimony. On Monday, the auditor asked for tax returns. I had ours in a drawer and handed them over. Susan wasn't so lucky. I have no idea where Rich keeps our tax records, she admitted. They should be with everything else, but they're missing, Jake reassured her. Rich makes around $80,000. You're at $50,000. You'll get a solid support payment. At noon, Boudreaux strolled into the conference room, followed by Rich, looking miserable, and Bonnie, radiating pure hatred. No regret, no apology. She had destroyed our marriage, yet she looked ready to curse me out. She stayed silent, though. Boudreaux must have told her to keep her cool. Rich, on the other hand, looked like he was barely keeping it together. Mr. Jacobs, the court officer, introduced himself and his assistant, who began recording everything. Let's begin, Jacobs said. You'll sign statements confirming that all information is accurate and admissible in court. Today's goal is to list assets and income. We won't discuss the prenuptial agreements. That's for later. He glanced at his paperwork. For vehicles, we'll use Blue Book values. If a car is in your name but primarily used by a child, it's still considered yours unless both parties agree otherwise. He looked around the table. Let's start with Mr. and Mrs. Fontenot. Going through vehicles, the boat, firearms, and household items took minutes. Even Bonnie's jewelry wasn't an issue. I had already appraised it, and its value exceeded my truck and tool collection combined. Then we got to the money. Jake presented checking and savings statements, including the withdrawals I made when I moved 80% of the funds. He did the same for Susan and Rich. Jacobs flipped through the paperwork. Everything looks standard, he said, then paused. Except for one issue, Mrs. Fontenot's reported income. There's a large discrepancy between her salary estimate and her tax returns from the last 2 years. Rich stiffened. I estimated her salary at $60,000, I said. Just multiplied her payroll by 12. Jacobs nodded. Yes, but her tax records show an income of $140,000 for both years. I blinked. My mind raced, but my mouth moved faster. What the hell? Jacobs' assistant frowned at my reaction. You didn't check your tax returns before filing? Jacobs asked. I shook my head. Bonnie and Rich insisted we use a new accountant, a client of theirs. Everything was filed electronically. I only checked the refund amount. Bonnie's face went pale, then red. Her base salary is correct, Jacobs continued, but she also received annual bonuses of $80,000, bringing her actual earnings to $140,000. I turned to Boudreaux, then to Bonnie and Rich, who looked just as blindsided. Jacobs wasn't done. As for Mr. Jenkins, he received $110,000 in bonuses for the same period. Susan stiffened. I didn't have our tax returns, but you got copies from their accountant, right? Yes, Jacobs confirmed. Susan leaned forward. So, how much extra money are we talking about? Jacobs adjusted his glasses. A total of $160,000 over 2 years. I turned to Bonnie, my voice cold. Where's the money, Bonnie? She hesitated, calculating her response, but I wasn't finished. That explains why you two flew to the Cayman Islands last Friday. You were trying to hide it. She opened her mouth, closed it, then snapped. What are you talking about? Realizing her mistake, she blurted, How did you find out? Are you following me? I smirked. Didn't have to. You did it yourself. Turning to Jacobs and the attorneys, I spoke clearly for the record. Years ago, Bonnie and Susan insisted we put locator apps on the kids' phones for safety. Turns out, they work both ways. Bonnie and Rich exchanged panicked glances. Last Friday, I asked Jason and Deirdre to call Bonnie. No answer. When they checked the app, she was offline all day. The other kids checked Rich's location, same thing. Then in the afternoon, they reappeared, near the coast. We checked flights into New Orleans and figured it out. I leaned back. Turns out you were in the Cayman Islands. Bonnie and Rich looked wrecked. They also stopped by your office Monday. You weren't there. The locator app showed you in Baton Rouge. I'm guessing that's when you moved the money. Jake cleared his throat. Boudreaux, you know we can subpoena those records. And you also know advising clients to hide assets offshore is illegal. He smiled thinly. Interesting timing. Your clients flew there just hours after hiring you. That's going to be a problem. Boudreaux's face turned beet red. I never suggested such a thing, he stammered, eyeing the court recorder and Jacob's assistant. Bonnie burst into tears. Even Rich looked rattled. Susan turned to Jake. Can we make them return the money? Jake nodded. We'll get our share, even if we have to garnish their wages. Once we prove infidelity, they'll owe the full amount. Bonnie lost it. But the money's gone, she shrieked. We tried to transfer it, and it disappeared. Rich motioned for her to stop, but she waved him off. I think he took it, she accused, pointing at me. I stared at her like she had lost her mind. I didn't even know about the money until now, I said. I suspected you were hiding something, but I had no idea how much. I leaned in. So what's your story? You spent it? Or lost it? Because both sound like nonsense. She shook her head frantically. We tried to transfer it at a bank in Grand Cayman, but the transfer was denied. That's why we went to Baton Rouge Monday, to figure out what happened. Jacobs folded his hands. Provide me with the Baton Rouge bank details. I can get answers faster than you can, and it will go on a record. As we left, Bonnie and Rich looked devastated. Susan turned to me. Where the hell did the money go? I shook my head. No idea. First, they had secret accounts. Now, it's all gone. Apparently, I muttered. Another mystery. Jake and Boudreaux expedited the case. I suspected Bonnie and Rich begged for it. They lasted a week at the Holiday Inn before moving into an apartment on Victoria Street. Probably their old love nest. The thought made me chuckle. Whatever money they had wasn't enough to keep them comfortable. And if Boudreaux charged high fees, they were in for a rough ride. For once, I almost wished for another message from my mystery source. But there was silence. All 5 kids insisted on being at the hearing, and I didn't argue. They had been just as affected as we were. They had every right to see it through. Before we entered, Jake gave us a rundown. Judge Guidry prefers a semi-formal approach. He doesn't sit on a raised bench. He stays at the table with everyone to keep things from getting too tense. Just follow my lead. We took our seats. Jake, Susan, and I on one side. Boudreaux with Bonnie and Rich on the other. The kids sat behind us in a loose formation. Judge Guidry walked in, and we stood. He waved us down. I keep things informal in family court, he said. Speak when addressed, raise your hand if needed, and be respectful. If you piss me off, you're out. Understood? The kids didn't even crack a smile. Flipping through his files, he said, Normally these would be separate cases, but given the overlap, we'll handle them together. Bonnie shot me a glare, but I ignored her. There's an infidelity claim, the judge continued. In Louisiana, infidelity doesn't automatically dictate divorce terms, but prenuptial agreements do. If proven, they affect property division. That said, let's start with the financial discrepancies. Bonnie and Rich stiffened. There are concerns about hidden assets, he said, his tone sharper. Mrs. Fontenot and Mr. Jenkins had accounts in Baton Rouge, holding $120,000 and $160,000. My pulse quickened. We had them. But, the judge went on, the Monday before divorce filings, both accounts were drained. Bonnie went rigid. Rich swallowed hard. Bank records show the correct passwords and security answers were used, so the transfers were authorized. No sign of fraud. Bonnie and Rich looked completely blindsided. The judge leaned back. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Bonnie's eyes darted. What do you mean? He smirked. Every cent of that $280,000 was split evenly into 5 accounts, belonging to Jason and Deirdre Fontenot, and Robert, Dave, and Cindy Jenkins. My jaw nearly hit the table. These accounts were set up years ago, likely as college or emergency funds. Under the Uniform Gifts to Minors Act, these transfers are legal and irreversible unless fraud is proven. I turned to Bonnie, who looked just as stunned. If the money had gone to our kids, why was she acting like she lost everything? The judge scanned the room. Anyone have proof of fraud? I almost laughed. I had hoped to recover what was mine, but this, their hidden stash ending up with our kids instead, it was poetic justice. Bonnie and Rich glared at us like we had orchestrated it, but we hadn't done a damn thing. One by one, we shook our heads. No, Your Honor. Bonnie and Rich looked rattled. They had to be wondering if they had just crossed the line into financial crime. Good, the judge said, flipping to the next section. Now let's discuss custody. Deirdre raised her hand. Yes, young lady? She stood. I read that in some states, kids 15 and older can choose which parent to live with. The judge nodded. In Louisiana, a child's preference is considered, but I usually speak to them privately before making a ruling. Deirdre squared her shoulders. I don't need a private meeting. My mom betrayed our entire family. I want to live with my dad. She placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. He stood. Same here. Across the room, Robert, Dave, and Cindy stood too. We want to live with our mom, Robert said, for the same reason. I felt Susan tense beside me. I squeezed her hand. The judge studied them for a moment before giving a half smile. Noted, but infidelity hasn't been legally proven yet. Deirdre raised her hand again. Yes? I also read that at 16, I can petition for emancipation, and at 17, I can leave home without permission. The judge arched a brow. That's correct. The law allowing 17-year-olds to leave was originally for military enlistment. Emancipation at 16 requires financial independence. Deirdre nodded. I have a college fund and just received $56,000, not counting what was already in it. Cindy stood. Same here. She glanced at Deirdre before turning back to the judge. Between all of us, we have more than enough to be independent. Dave grinned. We could rent a place and be fine. Jason and Rob exchanged looks, then stood. If we pooled our money, all 5 of us could live on our own. I turned to the judge, waiting for his reaction. His lips twitched like he was trying not to laugh. Let me guess, he said, rubbing his chin. If I don't rule in your favor, you'll file for emancipation. And if you're 17, you'll just leave. All 5 nodded in unison. The judge sighed. Sit down. His tone was more amused than stern. Your opinions are noted. Shuffling his papers, he continued. Now, infidelity usually doesn't impact divorce outcomes. But since both marriages had solid prenups tied to infidelity, we need evidence. Jake stood. Your Honor, I have photographic proof of Richard Jenkins and Bonnie Fontenot engaging in sexual activity. Boudreaux shot to his feet. Objection. Those could be fabricated. The source is unknown. The judge glanced at Jake, then at me. Jake gave a nod. I cleared my throat. Your Honor, I don't know who sent the evidence. I received multiple video and audio recordings anonymously. The images were taken from those videos. Boudreaux smirked, thinking he had an opening. I continued. I hesitated to submit the full video, but I have a DVD and flash drive containing everything. I turned to Rich and Bonnie. They went pale. Judge Guidry caught their expressions. Do I need to play the video in open court, or do you acknowledge the infidelity? Boudreaux hesitated. He wanted to challenge it, but Bonnie and Rich had gone into full-blown panic. Bonnie burst out, No, please don't show it. Rich nodded furiously. Boudreaux sighed. Your Honor, may I confer with my clients? The judge's sharp gaze pinned him. Are they denying the claim? Bonnie and Rich shook their heads. Boudreaux exhaled. No, Your Honor, we concede. The judge nodded. Then here's my ruling. Silence filled the room. Given the admission of infidelity, the prenuptial agreements stand. Just like that, Susan and I were awarded 80% of the marital assets. The judge advised us to settle property division through our attorneys unless we wanted the court deciding for us. Then he turned back to custody. Given the circumstances, full custody of Jason and Deirdre Fontenot is granted to Robert Fontenot. Full custody of Cynthia, Robert, and David Jenkins is granted to Susan Jenkins. The non-custodial parents will have full visitation rights. Bonnie and Rich sat in stunned silence. And regarding child support, Bonnie Fontenot will pay Mr. Fontenot $1,000 per month for 3 years. Richard Jenkins will pay Mrs. Jenkins $2,000 per month for the same period. Additionally, each non-custodial parent must contribute $500 per month per child until they turn 18. A deep sense of satisfaction settled over me. Susan leaned in. They got screwed. Jake, however, shook his head. Not enough. We could appeal. I met Susan's eyes and shook my head. This is fine. She raised a brow but nodded. We had won. That was all that mattered. As we left, Jake arranged a meeting to finalize the property split. I told the kids to go home, change, and wait. We needed a family talk. At the back of the courtroom, my father was waiting. So, when did you figure it out, Dad? I asked. Susan frowned. It clicked when Deirdre and Cindy made those comments about the video, he said. Susan still looked confused. Pissed off 999, I said. It was them, the kids. Her mouth dropped open. No way, Dad nodded. I suspected when I checked an old credit card bill. Jason and Rob wandered over, listening. 2 months ago, these two asked to use my card for an anniversary surprise. Said it was only $500. What did they actually buy? I asked. Dad sighed. I checked. The charge was at an electronics store. The bugs, I muttered. Dad nodded. They wouldn't tell me much, but once I explained the card was in my name and the billing and shipping addresses didn't match, they spilled. So they spent $500 on phone bugs? Susan turned to Jason and Rob. Apparently, Dad said, and I still have no idea where they got the cameras. He followed me home, eager to hear the full story. All 5 kids were already waiting in the living room, falling silent as we walked in. Kitchen, I said. We talk at the table. Susan grabbed beers for Dad and me. Jason and Rob smirked, holding out their hands. You might be old enough to spy, but you're not old enough to drink, I said dryly. They shrugged. All right, I said, sitting down. Who's starting? Deirdre took a breath. From the beginning. She glanced at Cindy before continuing. It started when Cindy and I dropped by Mom's office one afternoon. She wasn't there. Neither was Uncle Rich. This was during phase 2 of lockdown. We figured we could hit them up for movie money, but the receptionist said they'd left hours ago. So we checked the locator app, Cindy said. The one they made us install? I nodded. It showed them at some random address, she continued. So we went to check. It was an apartment complex. Uncle Rich's car was outside, so we waited. They came out later, Deirdre said tightly, holding hands, laughing, acting like a couple. She exhaled sharply. That's when we started tracking them. 3 days in a row, they went back to the same apartment, always for about an hour and a half. Sometimes late at night, after work, but before heading home. We told the boys, Cindy added. Rob leaned forward. That's when we started researching surveillance equipment. We found bugs that turn a phone into a live mic. Runs in the background, doesn't interfere with calls. Drains the battery faster, Jason noted. We convinced Pop to let us use his credit card to buy them, Rob admitted. Sorry for lying, Pop. Dad waved him off. Installing them was easy, Rob said. We took turns listening and recorded anything important. I nodded. That explains the audio. What about the video? And how'd you figure out which apartment was theirs? We checked their keys, Deirdre said. Both had one labeled 201, not an office number. So Jason took Mom's key and made a copy, Cindy added. Susan gasped. You broke in? Not broke in, Jason corrected. We inspected. I pinched the bridge of my nose. We went inside a couple of times, Deirdre admitted. We knew we needed cameras. So we bought a few, Cindy added. And a small transmitter, Dave grinned. That part was cool. He was excited, completely ignoring the fact that he was describing the takedown of 2 marriages. Deirdre continued. The cameras were motion activated, so they didn't drain the batteries too fast. The receiver was hidden under the couch. It stored footage and sent it to our home computer. We recorded everything, Rob finished. I exhaled. So let me get this straight. You installed cameras, recorded video, captured audio, and then anonymously sent it to me? They exchanged looks. Yes, Deirdre admitted. I took a deep breath. These were my kids, my nieces and nephews. I couldn't explode no matter how reckless this was. But there was still one more issue. Let's talk about the money. Deirdre squared her shoulders. When Cindy and I first went to that apartment, we found Mom's stuff there. Clothes, makeup, towels. We knew what was happening. They'd clean up after their workouts and go home to you and Aunt Sue like nothing was wrong. We were furious. They weren't just cheating you, they were cheating us. She took a breath. The secret bank accounts were a side discovery. When we searched the apartment, Cindy said, we found bank paperwork, login instructions for an online account. It took time to track them, Deirdre admitted. We even checked Dad's files a couple of times, and we found more in Aunt Bonnie's office. Cindy smirked. The receptionist let us in a few times. We just waited. I rubbed my face. And the passwords? Aunt Bonnie kept a notebook in her purse, Cindy said. Had all her passwords. We tried a few, Jason said. And bingo. They used the same password for both accounts, Rob added. When we saw how much money they had hidden, Jason said, we were pissed. Were they stealing? Embezzling? We had no clue. Dave cleared his throat. I was the one who suggested moving it. Everyone turned to him. He blushed. It seemed fair, Jason shrugged. We read how divorce splits money, and we didn't want them keeping any of it. We already had accounts Pawpaw set up for us, so we figured, why not move all of it? I thought the cops might catch us, Deirdre admitted. But since it was technically our parents' money, we figured we wouldn't be in real trouble. The rest of us agreed, Cindy added. So we did it. If we had known about the 80/20ths prenup, we probably wouldn't have, Deirdre said. I leaned back, shaking my head. Honestly, it worked out better this way. Jason hesitated. Dad, we didn't want to hurt you and Aunt Sue, but we didn't know what else to do. So we sent the first video, Rob continued. We kept watching to see what you'd do. If you had grabbed a tool, we would have told you everything. Deirdre met my eyes. We just hope you're not mad. I turned to Susan, who had been speechless this whole time. Finally, I exhaled. I hope you kids never turn on me and Sue, I said, giving them a pointed look. Because if you ever pull something like this on me, I will find a way to punish you, even if I have to do it with a walker in a nursing home. They chuckled. You'll never have to worry, Daddy, Deirdre said firmly. You'd never betray us. We Cajuns stick together. Dad crossed his arms. One thing I don't get. You used my credit card for the bugs, but where'd you get the money for the cameras? Jason grinned. From them. I narrowed my eyes. Explain. Each camera was $500, video, sound, motion sensors. We got 5, plus a transmitter to send everything to Deirdre's computer. Total cost? $3,500 plus shipping. But we already pulled the cameras, Dave added. We can return them for half the money back. The phone bugs are probably lost, though, Rob admitted. Jason continued. As for the credit card, we used your Visa. I froze. I don't have a Visa. Jason shrugged. We do now. I applied in your name and forged your signature. At least he had the decency to look slightly guilty. $10,000 limit, Deirdre added. We bring in the mail, so hiding it was easy. Cindy grinned. We also made the pissed off 999 email. Rob came up with the name. Rob smirked. Because, well, we were pissed. Susan, Dad, and I exchanged glances. We were impressed. So the bugs in their phones still work? I asked. Dave nodded. Yeah, as long as their batteries are charged, we can hear everything. Everything? I raised an eyebrow. Well, he clarified, only when they're talking. It's voice activated, so we mostly get car noise and business calls. We take turns listening and saving anything important. Susan and I exchanged another look. I want access to those audio files, I said. Dave grinned. Done. Because of that, we always knew Bonnie and Rich's next move. A couple of months later, Karma did the rest. They got fired. Rich had been using company funds to pay for their apartment. And Bonnie? Her bonuses had been way too high. Rather than a scandal, the company let them go quietly. Since then, they've barely called the kids, struggled with child support, and drowned financially. I should wish them well, but I don't.